The way this came about, our speaker today is Dr. William Rich from Washburn University, professor of law. We were speaking with Alex Millen, who was in Georgia doing an internship over the summer last year, and he happened to mention that he had run into, was it a professor?
I think
who was
to
right, who was actually in, and so we were very surprised to hear that Washburn had a program that they've been running for several years actually in Georgia, dealing with law and assisting law faculty and law students there. And so I went over and had a chance to sit down with Dr. Rich and one of his colleagues, Ali, and we sort of discussed it, and I wanted to bring him over here to tell you a little bit about the program and what's involved. So.
Good. And obviously with this nice small group, we can just be conversational about this. So I'll give you a sense of what our program is and how it came about and what we have been doing and where we expect to go from here. But I do hope that, as I go, if you have questions or any aspect of this you would like to visit about more, we can feel free to interrupt. The program that we have is part of what's identified as the Judicial Independence and Legal Empowerment Project, which was initiated by the State Department. It is managed by the East-West Management Institute, which I assume is a familiar entity to some of you. I don't know how big an organization that is, but they basically administer the funds, and so they're the ones that we work with as we send our billing requests and all of those kinds of things. The Department of State announced this program about 4 years ago. We ended up being one of 2 law schools that are participating in the program, and it's a program, we receive about $250,000 a year for over a 3-year period for the as a grant from the program itself. The first step in establishing the program was interesting to us. We really haven't done much of this kind of thing as a law school. Our associate dean flew to Tbilisi along with the representative from the other law school that was participating, and the 2 of them, along with people from the project, the JILA project, then traveled all around Georgia and met with the deans and the law faculty from, I think, 13 different law schools, law departments in Georgia. Law schools are, as in almost every country outside of the United States, the law department functions as a department within the university. It's not a special graduate school as such, and that was certainly true in Georgia. They met with the various faculty. There was strong interest on the part of the Georgians to try to make a positive impression on us, because the schools were basically wanting to become our partner, and it was a matchmaking process as such. So after meeting with people at 13 different law schools, our associate dean in turn essentially said, these are the people I would most like to work with for the next 3 years. The group that she chose, the law school that she chose, was at a place called Free University of Tbilisi, a relatively new university, established really by a Russian oligarch, somebody from Georgia but who had gone to Russia, had become the chief executive of the largest engineering firm in Russia, made his $1 billion and left in about 2003, 2004, feeling like he was sort of getting out at just the right time and getting out with his funds intact. Became a very influential figure in Georgia. and established this university. He has a very clear sense of what he wants the university to be about, and a clear vision of free markets and that kind of thing. Was very excited about establishing a program with the university, with the United States as a result. Has been an interesting character to work with, although he himself is not very closely involved with this project. After the matchmaking process, it was interesting. The other school that was with us, they got the second choice in terms of a law school to partner with, and they chose Tbilisi State University, which is a very different, very established university in Georgia. Tbilisi State is the university that really has the resources, and that was certainly a draw, and it becomes an interesting issue as we continue to work with legal educators more generally in Georgia. The first and primary project for us was establishment of a National Center for the Study of Commercial Law. And that was what the people in the State Department, or the project that we're dealing with, had in mind. That was part of our proposal to begin with, and certainly it was part of what attracted Free University to us. So that Center for the Study of Commercial Law is one piece of the total program that we ended up establishing. And there are a number of pieces to that program, things that we have developed during the time we've been working with them. Part of it was simply providing them with resources. Research resources, some books and that kind of thing, which they were very happy to receive. Their library for their law school. My sense is that it was about the equivalent of what you have in this room. So that the need for resources was really very obvious as we were there. There are ongoing activities of the Commercial Law Center. So they were in the process of both establishing this center. They have an annual symposium. It's a commercial law week that is announced for lawyers throughout Georgia, attracts law faculty and also some students. And we have consistently then sent 2 or 3 of our faculty members over to provide both a public lecture and then participate in the symposium. Symposium is generally structured with our faculty members making a presentation, and then there will be a Georgian response that describes how similar issues are dealt with in the within the legal profession in Georgia. A year ago, they were in the process of undertaking major changes in their labor law. And so we sent our labor law expert as one of our participants, and they were looking at the amendments that were being proposed to the labor law in Georgia, and we could comment in terms of experiences we've had, and they could in turn talk about the issues as they saw them there. And that is typical of the kind of activities that take place in the symposium. An outgrowth of the symposium in turn is help we've given in establishment of a commercial law journal for Georgia. And the presentations that are made at the symposium in turn are then turned into articles that are published by the university and in this commercial law journal. It's really the first and the only commercial law journal as such being produced within Georgia. Another part of the Commercial Law Center is that they have each winter a special winter school program in commercial law. They have chosen a remote location about 40 miles north of Tbilisi, where a group of 30 or 40 students and a couple of law professors will basically live there 24 hours a day and focus on a particular course in commercial law. Our faculty, we will send one faculty member to that program. They will have a faculty member. They might supplement that with additional visitors of one sort or another. When it works the best, our faculty members will in turn produce course materials. And the course materials and the co-teaching that goes along with it in turn creates a kind of course and a set of materials that they can use in future programs. So that our faculty members have in turn done a really thorough job of creating lessons, worksheets, reading materials, all of those things that go together to make up a good course in a subject area of commercial law. There has also been a summer program in commercial law. And this one is in Tbilisi, a little less isolated in that sense. But again, it's a focused week or a little more than a week with a member from our faculty and a member from their faculty. Or this summer it's going to be one of our faculty members and a judge in Georgia who will co-teach a particular course. Again, similar kind of objectives, similar kind of experiences. In the commercial law area in particular, we have found both a very active interest on their part and also real facility with English language and with an understanding of the commercial law subject area that we're dealing with more generally. So the winter school and summer school experiences have been very positive, and hopefully we've left behind now both the materials and some knowledge in the area that they will be able to carry on with. The other pieces of the commercial law project involve a combination of lectures that can be provided remotely. We've done this one or two times a year. It's not an excessive kind of thing. But at the end of this month, one of our faculty members will give a lecture on legislative drafting. And will do so from Washburn, but through video conferencing technology, so that he will be able to see the students who are there in Tbilisi. They will be able to see him, and the interaction is really pretty good when the technology is at its best. We also have participated in some joint research projects, so that they are in the process, and their faculty is in the process of producing right now a commercial law textbook, and one of their faculty members has a chapter that he is working on. He in turn has asked a member of our faculty to work with students at Washburn in putting together a chapter on that topic based on American experience. And he will take the work that they produce and will then integrate that into the text materials that he's developing. So that's sort of the series of activities that we've organized around the National Commercial Law Center. The more contact we had with the people there, the more broadly the more opportunities we saw to work with them in other ways as well. From the very beginning, there was an idea that we really should also focus on law teaching and things we have learned as particularly effective teaching methods. That Washburn is one of the co-hosts of the National Institute on Law Teaching, and that was really one of the primary reasons that we ended up being successful in winning this grant from the beginning. So our faculty members at Washburn who have really focused on teaching methods have carried out a whole series of workshops in Georgia, and they're hosted by Free University, but law faculty from throughout Georgia are invited to attend and participate. And they will spend usually 2 or 3 days in fairly intensive work, both giving examples of what effective teaching methods are, and then the Georgian participants will in turn teach each other and explore different techniques, different methodologies in terms of small group work, in terms of, in the law school, there's a tradition of Socratic kind of dialogue that is expected to take place. But we go beyond those things currently in law teaching to try to emphasize more in the way of student feedback, more in the way of student participation, better student assessment, and so on and so forth. The teaching that, and the efforts we've made in the area of teaching methods have also led Georgia to what we hope will be an establishment of a Georgian Law Teaching Institute. And one of the things that will happen this summer will be the formal establishment of an Institute for Law Teaching in Georgia. Again, with the idea that they in turn will be able to carry on what they have been doing. Part of the experience we have in this country is shaped by the way in which law schools generally come together with the Association of American Law Schools. And the theory is at least that the Georgian Law Teaching Institute will also be a way to formalize relationships among the law schools in Georgia, so that law faculty of various schools will interact with each other. When you have a small law school, chances are you just have one person with a specialty in a particular area. This makes it possible for that person to interact with others at other law schools that have similar interests, and hopefully that kind of thing is going to develop as a result of the teaching institute that we're establishing there. A specialty component of law teaching has been the teaching of legal writing. And because that's been one of our strengths at Washburn, another part of this whole program has been the development of legal writing workshops. So people who teach legal writing at Washburn have led usually 3 workshops each year during the life of this program in different aspects of teaching legal writing, how to teach persuasive writing, how to teach transactional writing, those different kinds of topics, and then also providing materials that are used for teaching writing, so that and again, what happens in these workshops is that law faculty from throughout Georgia come together, participate in the workshop, usually 15 to 20 law faculty from around the country, and they in turn experience the development of the materials that they'll use, get ideas from us in doing that. We will hold the last of our legal writing workshops in June of this year. And in June, what they're going to be trying to do is sort of summarize what they've been doing over the course of the last 3 years and pull all the materials together and present that kind of a package to them. My area of interest is constitutional law, and I couldn't care less for commercial law. But nevertheless, when a group from Georgia came over at the very beginning of the program, part of what I discovered is even the people who were teaching commercial law in Georgia also had a very strong interest in human rights and in constitutional law and in the kinds of things that I'm particularly interested and excited about. And it's also, I both enjoyed very much working with them. They in turn invited me to come and teach a winter school program in constitutional law, which was separately funded, not part of the grant when we first went through this process. But as we got more experience, the people from the Judicial Independence and Legal Empowerment Project recognized that there was value to this, so we expanded the scope of what we were doing to now include our joint efforts in the constitutional area. The winter school has been ongoing since that time. Again, we go to a remote location. Very interesting, the place where they host these kind of remote programs used to be a jamming station where during the Soviet period they could jam radio broadcasts, particularly Radio Free Europe and so on and so forth. It turns out to be quite a nice facility with dormitory rooms and a cafeteria and a lecture hall and good internet access and all those kinds of things. Biggest difficulty I had was that when I first arrived, they were in the midst of the worst snowstorm they'd had in 20 years. So that while driving out to this place called Basiletti, we got stuck and had to be pulled out by the local police and so forth, and then had to hike with our suitcase the last half a mile into the place where we were staying. The students were wonderful. Again, their English language skills were significant. Some of them had been foreign exchange students here in the United States. In fact, one of them had spent a year in Wichita. So they were fun to work with. And I did notice that we brought in, at one point, the chief judge from the Constitutional Law Court in Georgia, and he taught in Georgian. And the level of interaction in Georgian was, of course, very different from what it was when I was teaching in English. But the enthusiasm was the same all the way through, and it was really terrific. And a good experience for me, and it's been a good experience for other members of our faculty who have participated in these programs subsequently. The other thing that we developed in the context of the constitutional law program was that at the law school there, they had a constitutional law clinic where their students, the constitutional law court in Georgia, would identify big cases that were pending before the court, and the students at Free University were expected to write an amicus brief, a friend of the court brief, advising the court on legal research in the area, case law in the area, alternative ways of resolving the particular cases before them. Well, the Georgian court is very open to and influenced by U.S. experiences. So what we created was a program where I would get a group of our students together. Our students would put together a memorandum summarizing what the U.S. law is with respect to the particular issue that was pending before the Constitutional Court in Georgia. We would send our memorandum to the group of students who were working on the same issue there at Free University, and then we would hold a video conference with our students and their students where they could discuss with each other the issues that students at both schools had been researching and working with. And their students would put together the actual brief that went to the Constitutional Law Court, but we end up with the Constitutional Law Court in turn making what was called a landmark decision in property law of Georgia and explicitly expressing gratitude to the students at Washburn University for assisting with the development of all of this. That's been a wonderful program. That's the kind of thing that I hope is going to continue. There's no reason why we can't just continue to remotely work with each other in that manner. We now know each other well because we've had opportunities over time to work with each other. I should have mentioned different groups of their faculty have made a couple of trips to Washburn and then spent a week or two with us here, so that we could really introduce them to our legal community, and we could also get to know them well through the process of all this. One of the things that we have encountered is the fact that the people who are really the driving force, both at the university and in the legal community, are young. I mean, they make me feel ancient. The dean of the law school's just over 30, and so are almost all the faculty members we're dealing with. When the chief judge of the Constitutional Law Court came out to make his presentation, I saw this car arrive with 3 guys in the car, all, you know, maybe late 20s, early 30s, in their leather jackets and blue jeans, and came in, and I thought they were delivering food. It was the constitutional law, the chief judge, chief justice of their constitutional law court. And the older, you know, people in my generation, for the most part, grew up in a different era, learned law in a different era, and it's really the young people who are taking over the teaching of law, and so far as we can tell, in much of Georgia. It's not unique to the Free University people we're dealing with by any means. And you see it in terms of what's happening in their government. Now, part of what's happened in the government in Georgia, as many of you I'm sure know, is there's been turmoil. We had that there was a very pro-Western government, but that government also suffered from problems of corruption of one sort or another. They were thrown out of office. There's a new government now that is at least somewhat friendlier towards Russia. Obviously, you all know about there were actually bombs dropped in Georgia during the war back in 2007. So the friction between Georgia and Russia has been constant. There are parts of Georgia that are governed by Russia to this day, 2 of the states in Georgia. So that relationship is a tense relationship. With the new government in Georgia, the founder of Free University is now at odds with the Georgian government. Generally speaking, the faculty that we have been dealing with were supportive of the more pro-Western government that preceded him and are somewhat at odds. And there have even been efforts by the government there to decertify or take away the accreditation from the university since the new government has been in power. Doesn't appear that that's going to happen. But that was an issue where they in turn asked for our help in terms of just materials on accreditation and processes and so on and so forth as they were dealing with their central government. Anyhow, the age, the issues, the temperament and so forth are all issues that we've been dealing with as part of this program. One other piece of the program that we tried to get off the ground was development of libraries at the law schools, and in particular development of a program for interlibrary loans among the law schools there. Frankly, that one seems to have failed totally because Tbilisi State University has all the resources and they're not about to share them because that's the advantage that they have over all of the other law schools, and the other law schools don't really have enough that it makes it worthwhile to develop that kind of program. We meet once a month by video conference with the the dean of the law school and the law faculty there. I have been handling the administrative aspects of the program for Washburn for the last couple of years. And I have a team of people, each of whom has responsibility for one aspect of this program. All of us in turn get together and we meet at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning here in the U.S., which works perfectly for them because and I don't know if this is true of all of Eastern Europe or uniquely true of Georgia, or just the people we've worked with in Georgia, but they're night people. They're not morning people. And I certainly discovered that when I was there teaching at Basilati, where I was ready for breakfast at 8 a.m. They might be at 10, which is when we're generally scheduled to begin our classes. But boy, at midnight, they were showing videos in the lecture room, and they were all up and very active. At least that's what I understand. I wasn't part of that for the most part. It's been a terrific experience for us. I hope that as we develop our long-term relationship with them, and as we lose the State Department funding, that there does not appear to be any successor funding through this project, but that we will be able both to maintain the relationship and make it a relationship that works better for our students, so that we'll build on the components of the program that our students and their students have been involved with one way or another. That may in turn develop into an exchange program, summer program, or semester-long program. It's relatively, they can do an intensive program during the summer or during that winter school and do it all in English. It would be more difficult for our students to go there for an academic program because of language difficulties. They certainly have students who could come here, and they have students who are very well prepared to work in English. Just to give you a sense of how much English is permeating, one of our colleagues from there, a lawyer in Georgia, has a 3-year-old son, might be 4 now, has hired an English tutor just to work with his 3 or 4-year-old to be sure that this child will be fluent in English at the very youngest age. And my sense is that that's not an atypical, certainly not atypical in terms of the feelings there about the priority, the importance of being able to converse easily in English and work with us in various ways. In part because that program is ending and we've had such a good experience, we've now indicated and submitted a statement of interest in a new program that's the U.S.-Russia peer-to-peer dialogue. And I don't know whether all of you are, but they were supposed to have let us know last week whether we had made it through the first round of screening. And the email message we got yesterday was an apology for not having done so, because they've received 315 applicants for that peer-to-peer dialogue. It would be a much smaller program. It's not one we're as excited about, but we were approached by first by the people we had worked with in Georgia, who in turn referred us to the Kazan Federal University in Russia, with the possibility of establishing something, and we'll see how that goes in the next couple of months. Yeah, I've done too much of the talking. Any?
Actually, I'm not a lawyer, I'm an architect. I'm kind of interested in what your experience of living there was. The daily life kind of thing, or were you pretty isolated from?
So far, I've only been there the one time. I'm going again in May. Actually, I'm going to participate in the commercial law symposium, but I'll talk about constitutional limits on commercial law. And in the remote location, I really didn't get much of that sense. In the remote location, in the winter, with snow every place.
You stayed home.
And the worst of it for me was, in comparison to what everybody else had described, the food out there was not particularly good. It was a form of sausage and potatoes every day for a couple of meals each day with no fresh vegetables, no fruits, and so on and so forth in the winter. I think they're working on that, improved. In Tbilisi, it was absolutely wonderful. So I had a couple of dinners in Tbilisi, and they were spectacular. And there's a wonderful tourist area, commercial area in old Tbilisi, filled with great restaurants and the like, and interesting commercial area. I also took one trip back into the mountains to a little village where they were making wine, and winemaking is a major product in Georgia, and they have a method of making wine that is very different. They bury these vats underground for a period of time and so forth, and the product is very nice.
I've had a lot of Georgian wine in Russia.
The economy, however, is not good. And they have been suffering economically really ever since the breakup from Russia. And there are efforts to figure out just what their economic niche is. There's some, I mean, the architecture is, the old architecture is interesting, the Soviet era architecture is not.
But they have some pretty interesting modern pieces in Georgia, works of architecture.
Yeah.
I'll send you a scan of them.
Okay.
Then you can,
Good.
when you're there, you can look at them.
Yeah. But I really didn't get much of a sense of the daily living, other than that they're night people, not morning people.
Yeah, winter, of course, that was a disappointment, because in summer, Georgia is different.
Well, that's why I'm so anxious to go in May,
Yeah.
How long are you gonna be there for?
just a week,
Just
but nevertheless.
Is it hard to get around, I mean, is it complicated flying there? Or can you?
Not terribly. The biggest difficulty is that the flights generally all arrive at 5 a.m. And,
There's not a Georgian around who'll pick you up.
well, I had, my worst experience in Georgia was when I arrived. It gave me both a sense of what a foreign country I was in and how different their language is. I arrived, I went through customs, picked up my bag and so forth, and walked out, and there was a sign taped to the bar with my name. And there was a guy standing behind it. I pointed at my name, and he said, yeah, come with me. Well, it turns out he was the wrong driver. And
Because he couldn't read the sign probably.
he couldn't read the sign. And the foreignness of the language is such that even when I said Bill Rich,
Yeah,
that
you did,
didn't
yeah.
mean anything whatsoever.
Yeah.
It wasn't a recognition.
So where
even
did
of
he
a
take
name.
you?
Well, about 20 minutes later, he got a call from the people he was supposed to have picked up, wanting to know where he was and why he wasn't there, and so that, but I didn't know where I was supposed to go.
Right.
I knew that there was a hotel someplace. So he ended up taking me to one of the big hotels where there were all these law clerks, desk clerks who spoke English, and I did have the telephone number of the dean and so forth, and eventually, of course, I was there at a time when the law school was on holiday. It got more and more complicated, but it worked. It was not.
I have two kind of quasi-legal questions. You mentioned constitutional law. I would be interested, when you were talking about judicial system, federalism, state courts, circuit courts, and so on, how exposed or how interested the students are to the American system with the state, with the circuit courts, and so on? And another one, also legal. What about the ADR, Alternative Dispute Resolution, which is so big in the United States?
Yeah.
Is it gaining momentum in Georgia at all? Is it being discussed?
First, on the federalism issue, there didn't seem to be particular attention on federalism per se, but that might have been as much a matter of the focus of what I was teaching as rather than a reflection of whether there really was an interest in federalism. Certainly interest in U.S. constitutional issues more generally, issues like the role of the judiciary, separation of powers,
Yeah.
and how the legislative branch and the executive branch and the judicial branch work with each other, what the role is of the judicial independence piece of that and so forth. Of the various law faculty that I worked with, several of them had in fact gone to school in the United States. In fact, the chief judge of the Constitutional Court in Georgia has an LLM from American University in Washington, D.C. So they're very familiar with and interested in the U.S. constitutional issues in that sense. ADR issues are clearly taking off. And in fact, for the commercial law symposium we're holding in May, one day is going to be devoted to international arbitration and dispute resolution. It's of interest to the Georgians, also of interest to people in the United States, because in context of international agreements generally, frequently there are arbitration clauses, and so it becomes a non-state decision-making process that is agreed to by the parties, but then getting enforcement of the arbitration decisions is a different matter altogether. And so it takes understanding and acceptance of arbitration by the government authorities in Georgia to effectively enforce the arbitration decisions, and that's part of why it's considered a hot topic there right now.
Do you happen to know roughly the percentage of the different cases, including sovereign cases, that are resolved through ADR as compared to? No.
Don't have a clue.
Because it's so big, as you know, the
Yeah.
disproportion in the United States
Yeah.
is so big.
Yeah.
No, okay.
You know, one of if we look at Russian experience with respect to judicial proceedings more generally, part of what we have part of what the research shows and part of what we found is it's really quite a different experience in a variety of ways, particularly in the criminal context, but I'm sure also in the civil area. I mean, the prosecution almost always wins in relative terms when compared to the United States. And that colors the process in a variety of ways. But the young judiciary in Georgia is clearly very interested in changing from the model that they have had historically. And so it's all in transition. I'm sure ADR is a part of that, but I just don't know how big a part.
Does Georgia have a codified Roman system of law, or?
Yeah.
They do?
They do, and that's part of the history in that sense.
Yeah.
And they're in the process of revising their codes. It's interesting, though, that with the inauguration of a constitutional law court and with the current decision-making process, the current structure that they have, they're being influenced by the experiences with judicial precedent and precedent as affecting interpretation of the law. That's true not just in Georgia, it's really true throughout the world, and it's true in Europe. We're changing our system. We've become much more code-oriented than we have been historically, than the common law would originally suggest. But they're also becoming more open to giving weight to judicial precedent. And the systems are no longer as starkly different. It's not a stark civil code system versus a common law system as it was once upon a time. And that's certainly true in Georgia.
Can I ask what you hear, on the ground in terms of corruption and level of corruption? And I know that Saakashvili was known at the beginning just tenure as someone who's, you know, the heavy emphasis on that.
And then,
Has it made a difference?
not, it's not something we have encountered in any way. Nor do I have a sense from the people we have worked with that corruption in terms of day-to-day interaction with government institutions is a terribly serious problem. It exists, but it has not been emphasized. But they have seen, I mean, the real corruption that we have heard talked about, at least, was really in the criminal justice system and abuse of that system, using that system as a way of punishing foes and so forth. But I should emphasize my exposure is limited. You know, I'm not. I don't have roots in the area, nor is my academic discipline one that necessarily builds on a lot of knowledge of their systems.
As a follow-up to Bart, that's exactly what my question as well, because from what I hear from different people working with organized crime, anti-corruption, and so on, that Saakashvili, the former president, dealt a decisive blow, that he really turned things upside down with corruption and expelled, and there was this threat. Any case, a proven case of corruption, you are fired. So that's what I hear, that there was a radical change in Georgia. So that's why I would be interested. And did your students or faculty discuss corruption at all and the issues associated with corruption?
Very little.
Very little?
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, there clearly was discussion of that history from Shevardnadze to Saakashvili and so forth, but and with an understanding that part of what was involved in all of that was that the problems of the corruption of the prior system. But then the new government, in turn, it used an anti-corruption message as well in taking power a year and a half ago. So we asked them how they felt about the Olympics that were going on. It's obviously just right up the coast from Georgia, and the only thing they cared about was that there had been a flaw in the opening ceremonies, which they thought was kind of nice, but everything else, I mean, if it's Russian, they just don't even want to talk about it.
Yeah.
That the opposition is really deep.
Do you know of other programs like yours, like in neighboring country, Armenia or Ukraine?
I don't. And I wish I did know more. I mentioned earlier that I actually went to Ukraine on a different program 20-some years ago, which was similar in terms of an exchange of legal educators. But that program died, and I haven't heard that there was any succession to it. I suspect there are, but I just don't know about them. I know that there are people who are professional project managers that go from country to country and that work on programs of that sort. And I only know that because we've dealt with them in this program.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you for coming over.
Thank you.
We've got a lot for you.